In this episode, I get to chat with Ray Reddy, who is currently the co-founder and CEO of Ritual. For those that don't know what Ritual is, it's a mobile food pickup app that taps networks of coworkers and colleagues for fast, easy pickup and pay at a wide variety of local restaurants and coffee shops, and is truly expanding internationally. If that's not impressive enough, prior to Ritual, Ray co-founded a mobile commerce company called PushLife that was acquired by Google in 2011. And at Google, he actually led mobile product management for shopping and commerce. So he's got a wealth of knowledge and it's amazing. And it's actually at Google where Ray saw the potential to have a better leverage of using social application to unlock mobile commerce, and that's how Ritual was born. He has so many golden nuggets of wisdom to share. It's amazing. So in this episode, we get to chat about how they built a product for everyday people and why they selected Toronto to do this as opposed to Silicon Valley to launch. I was very curious about that. And how not being covered in the tech press for 2 years was an actual amazing gift. And he really talks about how we need to change the view on failure. And there is absolutely so many other great, amazing gold nuggets in this. And I really can't wait for you to hear it and hear your feedback. And I really hope you enjoy. Cheers. Welcome to the Can Innovate podcast, the first ever podcast designed to showcase Canadian thought leadership. These innovators share industry insights, entrepreneurial best practices, lessons learned, and other tips that we can incorporate right into our lives, our careers, and our businesses. So let's get inspired. Welcome, Ray. I have to tell you, I am a massive, massive fan of Ritual. I think it's actually literally changed my life.
That's great to hear. We're super excited to have launched in Toronto first, and yeah, that makes me very happy to hear that.
It's crazy because honestly, lunch is always a busy time no matter what. But then you guys give us kind of like inspiration for lunch too. Like, sometimes you kind of get into a routine and you're like, oh, what else can I eat? That's a little bit more dynamic. And you've given that. So it's been amazing. Plus I cut the lines. So that's even better.
Mm-hmm. What's not to love about it?
I know. So for our listeners out there, can you tell us a little bit where the idea of Ritual came about? Like, it's quite clever.
So I spent 4 years at Google. So I led the product team for mobile commerce there for a long time, and I think local was a space that I probably taught me and my co-founders had been thinking about for many years, even before that. And the concept of Ritual is just a very simple one, which was if we can help people connect with local businesses digitally, we can make the experience better. We can help with a lot of the things that you mentioned. We can help people discover local businesses better. We can help, it be more efficient and much faster. What would take, 10 minutes waiting in store and paying could take 10 seconds if we could, digitally connect people with businesses. And on the flip side of it, we could help businesses too. We could help them, measure the customer experience and order error rates and retention and all of the things that retailers get with e-commerce, local businesses could get with a digital platform. And so I think the concept started out with being how do we digitally connect people with local businesses? And what we launched was a very small part of realizing that full vision. And to be honest, we're still very early in that journey. The app and the platform keeps evolving, and we think we're probably a decade away from, fully realizing that.
It's amazing. And the name Ritual is so clever. Was there a story of how you guys came up with that name? Because I'm constantly curious when company names.
Yeah, names are a funny thing. I think it's funny how you grow into names, and I think now it's hard to think about Ritual being anything else but Ritual. But we debated a few different things at the time, and I think one of the things we wanted to get through with the name was that Ritual wasn't meant for special occasions. It wasn't meant for just when you are busy or in a rush. It was for every day. And because things like food delivery aren't for every day. They're things that you use in an emergency, or when you're in a cinch, or when you're and we didn't want people to think about Ritual in that way. We wanted to be a transition of your everyday behavior to something different. And so I think that was why we decided that something that felt like this is something that I do every day, it becomes a part of my life, was an important thing for us to get through with the name.
Yeah, it's really exciting because, a lot of us eat lunch at our desks all the time. And it's kind of neat because this whole ritual, it's kind of almost like a new kind of mantra in a way, because all of us kind of have to get up now to go pick up food. And it's like a quick way to be social and getting food and still getting back to our desk. And it's kind of neat that I don't know if that's kind of with the feedback you get.
Yeah. I think people, the one weird part about delivery can sometimes be, if you think about it, like delivery makes a ton of sense on evenings and weekends when you're at home, the last thing you want to do after a busy day is, leave your home to go get food. But if you think about it in the office, it's exactly the opposite, right? Like the concept of I'm going to pay more so I can stay stuck in my office, it really doesn't make any sense. And so that is the feedback we hear, that, people are busy. They don't necessarily want to waste 20 or 30 minutes of their break standing in line, and things like that. But they appreciate being able to, leave their desk for a few minutes, go for a walk with someone else, and sometimes people don't bring it back to their desk. Sometimes they, when the weather is good, they'll go eat lunch at a park. And we just think of it as, if we can give people time back, if people don't have to waste time doing annoying, monotonous things, that's just more time back to do things that matter. And, if that's being able to get a bit more work done, great. If that's wanting to enjoy, for a lot of, we have a lot of shift workers that sometimes, write in with feedback on, when I only have a 30-minute break, I don't want to waste 10 or 15 minutes of that waiting in line, because, all of the shift workers are on break at the same time, for example, and how this, gives them their full break back. So yeah, I think we hear that kind of feedback a lot.
Yeah, no, it's amazing because it's just it really is kind of life-changing in that sense. Like, lunch tends to be kind of a little monotonous and you're like, got to do all this other stuff, but you kind of allow people to take a break in a nice way. So it really makes a big difference. I was actually really surprised to find out that you were actually in Silicon Valley for so long. I know with, Google and everything else. And out of curiosity, why did you decide to launch Ritual here in Toronto? Because isn't Silicon Valley everyone's kind of entrepreneur's dream?
Yeah. When we originally talked about moving back to Toronto to start Ritual, we definitely got a lot of sideways looks, from people in Silicon Valley. And I think it ended up being a really good decision for us for a few reasons. One, the biggest one is that Silicon Valley has a very unique, demographic and makeup of people. And you have to recognize the bias that comes with that. So the challenge that Silicon Valley has is that average household incomes in the Bay Area are like seven figures in a lot of neighborhoods. So there's just a lot of very rich people, and they will often spend a lot of money to get more convenience or to get time back. And so we were really concerned about when building Ritual. What we understood was we weren't building a product for rich people. We were building a product for everyday people. And a big part of our ethos is that we have to deliver convenience without increasing price, right? And sometimes people in the Valley didn't really get that. They, to them, spending an extra $5 or $10 to get their $8, burrito delivered to them, they wouldn't think much of that. In fact, it frequently happens. But we just don't think that that's normal behavior. And so what we thought was we need to launch Ritual and build Ritual in a city that is really representative of the average population, the average user, where they would understand that the concept of not having to pay more for convenience would really resonate. So that was one part of it. I think the second part of it is you can sometimes get really caught up in just there's the good and the bad of being part of an ecosystem like the Valley. It's easy to just get caught up in the weird sort of like hype curves that happen there around things. The one nice thing about Toronto is that we actually didn't get covered in any of the tech press for like 2 years until we started to really launch a lot of US cities. And that actually worked to our benefit in some ways. I would actually credit that as one of the big reasons why we don't have a lot of competitors in the US. We got to grow and learn, and make a lot of mistakes and have a lot of success in Toronto without anyone really knowing about us. And what that meant was when we were ready to start launching US cities, we could move really fast. And it felt like we just kind of came out of nowhere when we entered the US. So I think for both of those reasons, I mean, those weren't, it sounds smart in hindsight, but I would say it wasn't that wasn't entirely. There were like other reasons around. All of us were originally from Toronto. We believed in being together when trying to build this. Get this product off the ground. So there were many reasons, but it definitely factored in that we wanted to launch Ritual in a city that we thought was representative of other big cities in the US.
No, that's brilliant. It's fascinating about, because I had never actually considered about Silicon Valley. It's not really a good simulation of a true everyday environment. And so that's kind of really interesting because there are a lot of those things we got to factor into it. But I'm glad that you did it here in Toronto. This is great. We get to test it out and play with it. And, I think it's really fascinating too that you're right. People didn't know about you, because I was going to ask about competition and competitors, because I don't even think Uber Eats is actually a real true competitor of yours. And I can't even think of any other competitor.
No, and we don't really have any. I mean, there's a lot of food delivery companies, and I think the way to think about it is food delivery companies, they service a different day part. They service evenings and weekends primarily. We service the workday. So we're about coffee, lunch for mostly for office workers, and and then afternoon coffee, and there's a little bit of dinner pickup on the way home. But we're almost the inverse of food delivery, where the work days are our big focus. And so even if you think about the merchant assortment, so coffee is a pretty big category for us, but it doesn't, coffee is generally not very deliverable. So food delivery companies we don't really see them as direct competitors today. Some of them have launched pickup, but I think that the main difference is that we care about the pickup in-store experience very deeply. That, it's interesting when you say, what is our product, right? Our product is not the app. Our product is the 10-second interaction you have when you walk into a restaurant and pick up your order. And that is actually what we're delivering. And when that happens smoothly, and the staff greets you in a friendly way, and your order is ready for pickup, and it's right and it's accurate and everything's perfect, that's a magical experience. But there's a lot of things that can go wrong in the real world, in stores. And so we take full ownership of the end-to-end experience. And I think the difference with delivery companies is that the experience that they're delivering is at the door, at your home, right? Their customer generally isn't going into the store. So it seems nuanced, but actually is a pretty big difference in terms of how we think about product and the overall experience versus how food delivery companies think about it. But outside of that, we used to have some smaller competitors in certain markets. I think at this point we've gotten to enough scale that they don't really exist in North America. There are some in other parts of the world.
So what is next for Ritual? So you're in, Toronto, you're in a bunch of US cities. Are we going for world total domination?
Yeah. In fact, we just launched Australia and the UK last year. So we're now in something like 24 cities, including a number of international cities that are in process of being launched. So yeah, by next year we'll be in many different countries and languages. So yeah, it is about really taking what's working here and seeing how how far we can take it globally.
This is pretty exciting. Did you ever think it was going to get this big?
We hoped it would get this big. I think we picked a category that we believed that we could build a large global brand, based in Toronto. We always thought of Ritual as the opportunity as being global. In fact, we think about ourselves like a global product that just happens to be built in Toronto. And in fact, outside of Toronto, until very recently, we didn't launch any other Canadian cities until about a month ago. Our entire focus was launching, big cities across the world, because we believe that if we want to build a global company, we can't think about it as a Canadian opportunity, right? Yeah. So we've raised money from global investors. We've thought global from day one.
But that's brilliant, right? That's really, really, and that's the truth of the matter is, like, a lot of go-to-market strategies are, we implement in the US, and then if it works really well, then you can able to scale pretty quickly from there on in. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure you must have experienced some kind of really interesting lessons learned. Is there anyone you can share with us?
A whole lot of lessons learned as we sort of, got to product market fit and scaled the product. I think that one of the biggest ones in the early days was, we were able to break very complicated problems into simple problems, test them, and validate them, and then invest in them more deeply. So a good example is, when starting Ritual, one of the things that we believed in was that the reasons why things like, because we aren't the first to do what we're doing. Actually, to some degree, we're the last company to do what we're doing. There have been many attempts to do this, and they've all failed. And we believe that the reasons for that were not product reasons. It was because most apps didn't have enough coverage in a neighborhood. They didn't, it was like a credit card that didn't work in enough places. And so we wanted to solve that problem. It's a hard problem to solve across a country or across a city, because even a city like Toronto has, 10,000 restaurants in the GTA. Like, getting coverage across the city is a difficult thing to do. Even today, we don't have good coverage across, 4 years later, across the entire GTA. But what we realized was that if you broke that problem into a much smaller problem, like a neighborhood, and in fact, to start, we said, what if you just broke that problem into, let's deliver a compelling product for the office workers in a single building? That's a very solvable problem, right? There's 100 people. Let's go get the 15 restaurants that are around them, and let's simulate having very high coverage for this small group of people. And so that's what we did. We were able to do that in 3 months. We built a bare bones product. We launched it in a very scrappy way. And in 3 months, we got the validation that we needed, that, the problem was indeed one of coverage, not necessarily the product. And when we did that, when we saw the results, how much value people were getting, how often they used it, we just had a lot of conviction around going after solving the problem at scale, right? So I think often that's one of the things we're good at doing is, a lot of problems, when you think about them at scale, they can be overwhelming, and it can take, some of them require a long investment cycle. And how do you have confidence in that? When you're not sure if it's going to work or not. And so I think one of the things that we one of the muscles that we built as a company is to be able to, break big problems into small ones, experiment and test them quickly, get some validation, and then go solve the bigger problem. And I think that's been a very helpful, tool set for us to have.
I love that. I love how you break things, complicated problems into smaller, almost like micro problems, so that it becomes a little bit more easier to overcome. I think that's brilliant. Do you have any advice for any of those aspiring or budding innovators out there that they have an idea and they just, it's too hard out there, or any motivation?
Yeah, probably two things that I would say. One is, building products and building companies is difficult, and it requires 110% commitment. In what I mean by that is, I sometimes hear about people who, are trying to pursue something like this part-time and they're afraid to leave their jobs and take the plunge. And I think the challenge with that is you're almost destined to fail. Because even when you give this a full-time effort, and give it 100%, the failure rate is still very high because these are difficult problems. So what I would say is, rather than trying to, dip your toe in the water and play around with something for a very long period of time, it's better to actually focus on something and say, I'm going to give this a year, or I'm going to give it 6 months, or whatever it is, and try really hard and give it everything you got to try to get some traction and make something of it. Because the other way, I've almost never seen it work. It's just too difficult. The second thing I would say is that it takes a while to change your view on failure. And I think that for myself included, starting out, I often viewed failure as failure, right? When things don't work out, it really sucks. You see it as, sometimes there's big consequences of it. You can lose money. You can think of it as being embarrassing. And it took me a long time to realize that all of the successes I've had and all of the successes we've had as a company stemmed from the learnings that came from the failures along the way. And it's so cliche, and people, I know a lot of people have the same advice, but it's amazing how and people probably said things like this to me early on, and it's amazing how I couldn't hear it when I was younger. And it took me going through the last decade and being able to connect the dots and seeing that behind all of the, anything that was successful, there were typically, 2 or 3 failures that preceded it that gave me or us the learnings to actually be successful in the end. And so I think I've fundamentally changed how I think about it. And, it's something that I definitely instill in our company, which is, how to really, when we fail at something, how to broadcast, rather than hiding it and being embarrassed of it, share the learning broadly, right? Let people learn from that so we don't make the same mistake again, and be proud of the learning. And I think it's a difficult thing for people to do in the early phases of their career, but I think the faster you change your view on it, the faster you can grow and learn.
That is awesome. I love that idea of changing your view on failure, because I guess they're all a bunch of micro little tests anyways to kind of finally finalize and figure it all out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So being that you're operating at least 110%, when you do get some downtime, what are some of your favorite things to do? Do you get downtime?
I do. No, I do get downtime. I think the first 2 or 3 years of building a company are super hard, and it does require 100%, or in fact, to some degree more than 100%, if that's possible, commitment. But I think you get to a point where, as you're starting to scale and as you start to be able to hire, a very capable leadership team, where you don't end up being pulled into every single problem and fire. And I think we're actually at that point. We probably got to that point over the last 12 months where that was true. So yeah, so it's starting to feel a little more, we're almost 5 years in now. So it's been a journey. But yeah, it's starting to feel like, a more, work-life balance is starting to actually become a thing again. Yeah, I enjoy a lot of things, travel, spend time with family. I have two daughters who are 4 and 7, and definitely spend a lot of time, with them. So yeah, a lot of things like that.
4 and 7, that must be just absolutely fun. Do they always ask you like, "Hey, Daddy, what do you do?"
Yeah, they do. They think it's absurd that I spend time just talking to people in rooms and typing on a computer, and they don't quite get what that really means. Or it's funny. It's funny to hear their opinion of what work is like. It's humorous.
I know. I actually bounce off a lot of ideas on my nieces and my nephew, and I was trying to get a title for a book, and actually the book title that I'm launching a networking book, and it's going to be called Connect the Dots. It came from my niece because I was trying to explain the concept of what I was trying to do and trying to understand things from their perspective is hilarious. Like they see things in a different dimension. So I was wondering if they're your kind of other kind of board of directors hidden in the background.
Yeah, to some degree, they always have a simple way of cutting through the noise and just getting to the meat of it. So
yeah. Oh, this is brilliant. So, out of curiosity, how can our listeners connect with you and Ritual?
Many ways. So from a jobs perspective, we're hiring a ton of people, and we've got a career page, ritual.co/careers. And with me personally, my Twitter handle is at Raymond Reddy, or I'm on LinkedIn. Both are good ways to connect.
Excellent. This is brilliant. Thank you so much for your time. I know how busy you are, so I really, truly appreciate it.
Of course. No, thanks for having me on the podcast.
Thank you so much for joining and listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode or any other episode, please share with your friends and colleagues. You can share on social media, the email link, the newsletter, and so on. Let's continue to support these Canadian innovators and help them really grow into bigger brands. Awareness and knowledge is totally key. Anyways, I can't wait to talk to you next week. Cheers.